If it weren't for its ridiculous action, its disregard for realism, and even its irreverent embrace of profanity, Saints Row might never have set itself apart as a standout open-world franchise. So when the Saints Row Reboot revealed a more grounded tone, Saints Row fans were understandably disappointed. But tone is one thing. What about gameplay? Will there still be a ton of crazy stuff to do? Or is this really shaping up to be a bland Grand Theft Auto clone? To answer that question, I examined tons of interviews, articles, and reports, and I've summed up everything I learned in this video. Now, I do stay away from story details, but if you're curious what it might be like to actually play this game, then I hope you'll join me as I look at 19 intriguing gameplay details about Saints Row. First off, the developers have mentioned in multiple interviews that Santo Ileso is the largest map ever in a Saints Row game. However, they've also said this is by no stretch the biggest open-world map ever created, so don't expect something overwhelming. But one really strange thing about the previews for Saints Row has to do with how many districts you might explore across the city of Santo Ileso. Some previews claim there will be 9 districts, and to be fair, that is how many are seen in this image of the Santo Ileso map, taken from one of Volition Games' official trailers. But then the Game Informer cover story said there will be 11 districts. And here's the kicker. In the official trailer titled Districts of Santo Ileso posted to the official Saints Row YouTube channel, Volition creative director Brian Traficante said there will be 15 districts. Take a listen.
Santo Ileso is a modern, urban, crime-ridden city sandbox spread across 15 districts.
Now that's straight from the horse's mouth, so we'll go with that. But what are the districts going to be like? Well, we've heard a few descriptions. First is Rancho Providencia. This is the home turf of Los Panteros, a rival gang which I'll talk about later, and the district itself has a rundown and weathered appearance. I wouldn't call it industrial, but it does look like more of a warehouse district. Next is Lakeshore, home to the city's financial district and the game's tallest buildings. Third is Monte Vista, an upper-class neighborhood filled with gated communities and high-end mansions. Next, if you dig retro Las Vegas vibes, check out El Dorado, the city's casino district. Or if you prefer the more laid-back feel of, say, Main Street, USA, check out Old Town. The last district we know anything about but haven't seen, at least not that I know of, is Mercado, which is where your Saints will set up their home base. More on that in a bit. Now, obviously, much of the map will feature more natural desert settings. I have a hunch this might be where those unaccounted districts that we don't see on the map might show up. In any case, Volition says the desert is made up of 2 types. There's the more dusty, arid, and wide-open Badlands, and then there's the scenic and beautiful areas filled with visually striking red rock cliffs and desert plant life. So that's Santo Ileso and the surrounding area. Now let's look at one of the cooler ways you'll use to frequently get around. While the superpowers in Saints Row 4 are obviously gone, the revamped wingsuit mechanics of the Reboot might be the next best thing. Heck, when it comes to flying, or rather gliding, it might actually be just as good. For one, the steering controls look pretty responsive, and second, you might actually gain certain wingsuit-specific combat abilities. Here we see your character stomp some enemies from the air, then resume flight. It's also been confirmed that you can hijack cars from above by landing on them if your aim and timing are right. And from this footage, it looks like you don't even need to deploy a parachute to touch down. Making things even more convenient is that, similar to, say, Far Cry 6, the developers have said when you fast travel, you'll have the option to drop out of the sky and use your wingsuit to glide to the ground. Next, while you may not be able to just jump into the air like Superman, there are what Game Informer called, quote, designated launchers throughout the world that I'm guessing will help you gain significant altitude if you don't want to instead leap off a tall building. That could be what we see here, but this actually looks to me like something else, maybe some sort of bomb that explodes, launching you into the air. See what I mean? There's some pretty over-the-top stuff here. The final maneuver that I haven't even mentioned is that you can use your wingsuit to catapult yourself off a speeding car. How much altitude you'll actually be able to gain, I don't know, but speeding towards, say, a jump or a cliff, then using the wingsuit to leap off before your ride crashes back to the ground does sound pretty cool. While it doesn't look like car combat in Saints Row is going to be all that crazy, it's definitely getting some upgrades. First off, you can now climb on top of your car, giving you a more flexible range of movement. Now, according to Game Informer, you can do this even if you're driving solo, but the time you'll want to spend on the roof of your car will be limited because you'll slow down due to the lack of natural momentum. So, this mechanic will obviously work much better if you have a co-op partner, and I do talk quite a bit about co-op in a bit. But even without a partner, I'm hopeful that solo players will be able to do this on solo missions that involve, say, a getaway driver. And speaking of, one of your fellow Saints, Nina, happens to be, you guessed it, a getaway driver. The next new car combat mechanic is the side swipe. With a button press and a tilt of the analog stick, you can now swipe left or right to cause damage to enemy cars and ram them off the road. And lastly, notice the health meters. I'm pretty sure that red is for the enemy driver and blue for their car. Now, some players might think these crowd the HUD, but for me, they'll help decide which vehicles to target if I'm getting chased by a group, and some of them are low on health. Okay, let's talk about co-op, but before I get into the whole untethered thing, let's cover some basic details. First off, co-op is drop in, drop out, and it's limited to just 2 players. But what's not limited is the number of missions you can apparently play with a friend. According to executive producer Rob Loftus, every single mission in the game is playable in co-op. Now, getting to the topic at hand, what does untethered even mean? Basically, if you're playing with a friend and you're just exploring, you're not required to stick together. As described by Game Informer, quote, co-op play is untethered, meaning you can explore the city independent of one another. But if one player enters a mission, the other warps to them and joins the task at hand. Now this could be pretty cool. According to the developers, Saints Row will literally let you prank your co-op partner. Quoted in Game Informer, Traficante said, "It's something totally different that we've never done before and that players are going to absolutely love. When they get together, they get access to the pranking system, and you can just let your imagination run with what would you do to prank your co-op partner." Okay, so what type of pranks are we talking about? For me, I'm hoping for more fourth wall breaking stuff. Maybe you can change the music on your partner's game to something like, I don't know, 1970s porno music. Or maybe you can change your partner's voice to sound like they just inhaled a bunch of helium. Those are just some random thoughts, but consider my curiosity piqued. One of the more frustrating aspects to some co-op games is when any progress you make with a friend doesn't carry over to your single-player game. But according to Game Informer, that's not the case in Saints Row. Here's a direct quote from senior editor Brian Shea. "If I come into your game and we do a late-game mission and then I go back to my game will remember that I completed that mission in your world, so when I get to that in the story, it's not going to make me replay that mission." Now, I will say in the specific Game Informer video where Shea mentioned this, he did for some reason sound a bit skeptical that Volition would pull this off, but if they do, this will be awesome. And one more thing about co-op. It's worth mentioning that as of now, Saints Row won't have cross-platform play, at least not at launch. However, it will have cross-generation play, so if you're on a PS4, you'll be able to play with people on a PS5, and if you're on Xbox One, you'll be able to play with people on an Xbox Series X or S. One of the more interesting and fun mechanics in Saints Row is what I've heard called the tethering mechanic, but I'm going to call it the wrecking ball mechanic. Basically, you can tow large objects behind you and use them to cause excessive damage to the environment. While this footage is of a specific story mission, Game Informer did say you can do this anywhere, anytime out in the open world as long as you have a vehicle with the right equipment. And by the way, yes, there is a poor soul in that porta potty. Before I move on, it's worth noting that helicopters can also be used to carry vehicles, and it looks like this will actually work as an even more literal wrecking ball. In Saints Row, your base of operations will be an abandoned church that you'll convert into a hideout early on. This is likely where you'll store your vehicles, your weapons, adjust your loadout, and customize your outfit. But you'll also be able to customize the church itself. According to, again, Game Informer, quote, "The church starts in a sorry state, but you can improve the HQ by raking in the dough." They also gave one example. In that mission where you're towing a porta potty behind your car, when you complete that mission, you're apparently rewarded with an actual porta potty that you can then place in the church as what I guess you could call a decoration. Now, this is a big one and there's a lot of information here, so bear with me. From all the coverage of the Saints Row reboot, criminal ventures seem to be one of, if not the biggest addition to the Saints Row formula. But what are they? Well, spread across Santo Ileso are 15 commercial properties that you can purchase. Do so and you can then set up a business on that lot that acts as a front for a specific criminal activity. For example, take the waste management company called Bright Future. You can buy a property, then turn it into a Bright Future waste processing site, which seems legit, but behind the scenes, you're actually taking money from corporations to dump illegal, toxic waste. This involves completing missions where you'll be driving across town trying to spill as little toxic waste as possible. And that's just one criminal venture. Each one comes with its own mission types, its own characters, and its own rewards. In fact, Game Informer confirmed in their gameplay impressions video that each criminal venture will have its own entire quest line. As for the others, there's a food truck business that fronts for a drug-running enterprise. You'll have to steal rival food trucks, then rebrand them as your own. The more you steal, the more drugs you can distribute, and the more money you'll make. Then there's a repo service. From the looks of it, you'll have to repossess cars using the game's towing mechanic I mentioned earlier. Another business is called Let's Pretend, which I think we've seen in prior games, but now it serves as a location where you'll plan full-on heists. You'll scope out locations, rob them, then make your getaway. We also got glimpses of ventures called Totally Legitimate Laundry Service, Cutting Edge Fashion Factory, and First Strike Academy. But I have no idea what these involve. Still with me? Good, because there's a lot more. In this clip, we see the menu where you can track your progress across all criminal ventures. Several more revealed here include Eureka Baiter, Kratz Radio, and the big one. And again, I have absolutely no idea what sort of missions these will require. Next, if you look at the bottom, you can make out what is clearly labeled Jim Rob's Garage, a take on the prior game's Chop Shops, which were called Rim Job's Garage. Finally, PC Gamer mentioned one of your criminal ventures will be an arms dealer, which I'm guessing helps you acquire new and more powerful weapons. Clearly, criminal ventures will provide a lot of stuff to do, and if we examine this screen even more, we can see how much cash you're actually generating across all of them. Then check out this icon at the top of the screen. It looks like you can level up your criminal ventures or maybe even your entire criminal empire. Now, if you're wondering if criminal ventures are optional, it sounds like the answer is yes, at least for the most part. Speaking to Maxageek.com, Volition Chief Creative Officer Jim Boone mentioned that you're not required to participate in every one of them if you don't want to. That said, it sounds like if you don't, you might be missing out. In a separate interview, Volition project manager Ray Haslip told Game Informer, quote, "There's a lot more impetus on players to complete the criminal ventures so that you get the actual rewards at the end of it. If you complete all of them, you start getting loaded with a bunch of different, wackier rewards." Okay, so those are criminal ventures, and that was a lot, but there's actually one more that I want to talk about, and it's one that Saints Row veterans already know how to play. So the one criminal venture that I didn't mention in the prior section is going to bring back the insurance fraud side activity from prior Saints Row games. In the reboot, you'll set up a criminal venture called the Shady Oaks Medical Clinic. You'll then go out on missions where, just like in previous games, you'll launch yourself ragdoll style into oncoming traffic. The more injuries you sustain, the more money you'll receive on your insurance claim. Also, we know this isn't the only minigame or side activity that's returning from previous games. We don't know what the others are, but an article on IGN said that Boone did confirm some other, quote, fan favorites are coming back. As I've mentioned, each criminal venture starts by placing a business on an empty lot of commercial property. And one thing Volition has made clear is that you can choose to place different businesses in whatever neighborhood you want. And apparently this adds some form of a city building aspect to the game. Consider where you choose to build a Bright Future waste site. Speaking to Rock Paper Shotgun, associate art director on Saints Row, Stephen Quirk said, quote, "The choices you make here will, for instance, engender resistance if you start putting toxic waste next to wherever the 1%ers live and work." How this might affect gameplay, we don't really know, but if it's more than just an afterthought, it actually sounds pretty cool. So I spent a lot of time earlier talking about criminal ventures, but there's actually another type of optional side quest in the game called side hustles. And these sound more like bite-sized, one-off missions. In their cover story, Game Informer highlighted two specific side hustle missions. One is called Riding Shotgun, where you're shooting at vehicles as the passenger of a drug deal gone bad, and another, called Pony Express, has you racing across the desert to deliver a package in a set amount of time. And according to Polygon, the game's Wingsuit will be the premise for another type of side hustle. However, going back to Game Informer, it seems like they contradicted this somewhat when they mentioned that something called Wingsuit Challenges might be a part of one of the criminal ventures. So take that for what it's worth. In any case, and I am speculating here, but it sounds to me like side hustles might be categorized into different mission types. Maybe deliveries, getaways, and some sort of wingsuit challenges, among others. And this would be in line with how the series has handled side content in prior games. And finally, one thing we do know about side hustles is they'll reward you with more than just cash and experience. For example, completing that Pony Express delivery mission apparently lets you keep the specific off-road vehicle you used to make that delivery. It comes as no surprise that you'll face off against rival factions in Saints Row, 3 of them to be precise. But what Volition is hoping to do differently in the reboot is to make the challenge of facing each gang even more distinct than in prior games. Speaking again to, you guessed it, Game Informer, Traficante said, quote, "From the ground up, these factions fight differently. They're all built to challenge you in a different way." Okay, so let's take a look. One gang that I mentioned earlier is called Los Panteros. They hang out in the gritty and rundown Ranchero Providencia district, and yeah, they clearly lift a lot of weights, and as such, they tend to favor hard-hitting, short-ranged melee weapons. Next are the Idols. These are a gang of anarchists that look like they could throw a citywide rave at the drop of a hat, and their greatest strength isn't their combat savvy, but the fact that they attack in large numbers. Sock it to them on their home turf, and they'll literally swarm you by the dozens. The final gang isn't actually a gang, but a corporation. More specifically, a military arms manufacturer called Marshall. Unlike the Idols or Los Panteros, they have an endless reserve of cash, and as such, their weaponry is cutting edge. More on that in a bit. Anyhow, those are your rival factions, and they'll not only fight you, but if they run into one another, they'll also fight each other, which could make for some interesting combat scenarios. Finally, it sounds like one of your goals in the game is to wipe each faction off the map, or at least beat them into submission. According to Polygon, quote, "After the Saints get powerful enough, the Saints will take on a gang in a big set piece at their headquarters." Now, whether this will be part of the main quest or presented as side content, I don't know, but if these supposed set pieces are cool enough, I'll definitely take part. It's no stretch to expect that the Saints Row reboot will have plenty of collectibles, and Game Informer actually revealed 2 that will be very familiar to fans of the series. Quote, "Simply driving around the city lets you do quick activities like snapping photos of tourist destinations with your phone or collecting errant drug pallets for the Saints' gain." Now, in addition to those touristy photo ops, it sounds like there might be a second way to take in the sights of Santo Ileso. In that interview with MaxiGeek.com, Boone said, quote, "We've got these little placards that you would see in the real Southwest, where you go up to it and you push a button and it tells you a little of the history. We have that in the game. There are little rewards if you go do all of those." Moving on, there will also be Easter eggs sprinkled throughout. For example, as a subtle nod to prior games, your base of operations will be located on 3rd Street. However, the devs have mentioned that Easter eggs like this are the only callback to prior games, so don't hope for, say, Johnny Gat to make a surprise appearance. With all the hubbub around Saints Row's dialed-back tone, this one might come as a disappointment, but for better or worse, the Saints Row reboot won't feature any weapons that resemble, say, a giant purple phallus. The devs confirmed this in an article on Stevivor.com. However, while there probably won't be any weapons modeled after sex toys, James Haig, design director on the game, did say some weapons will be, quote, "crazy and pretty far out there." And when Game Informer asked Bernstein what it's like using the most over-the-top weapon in Saints Row, well, just watch this clip.
Can you act out what it's like using the most over-the-top weapon in Saints Row?
So maybe there's an explosive football? Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas what this might be. When it comes to character customization, it sounds like the Saints Row reboot will provide, at the very least, all of the options from previous games. Traficante has been quoted as saying, "A target from day one is to be the kings of customization. We want to give our players all the things they've had in the past and more. That's what we've done." So we know there's the obvious stuff like age, race, and weight options, and according to multiple articles, you'll be able to place your character anywhere on the gender spectrum. As for the finer details, there's skin tone, eye color, and the like, plus you'll have 8 different voice options to choose from. Hopefully the zombie voice is among them. You'll also be able to add prosthetic limbs, and when it comes to outfits, layered clothing is back, and you can dress up in costume. Finally, one option lets you, quote, "censor your protagonist's nude body with things like emojis." This will probably be shown during certain cutscenes, or if the streaking mechanic is back, while you're prancing naked through the city. And while we're on the topic of customization, you'll also be able to customize your weapons and your cars. If you're worried about Saints Row having a poor selection of vehicles, I don't think that's going to be a problem. In addition to traditional cars, trucks, motorcycles, and helicopters, the various trailers for the game have shown off a pretty impressive range of rides. Among them is a monster truck, a tractor, a dune buggy, a tank, a golf cart, and when it comes to jets, it looks like the F-69 or something similar is making a return. And there's a hoverboard, and it looks like you can actually use it to literally crush your enemies. As for watercrafts, there is a lake in the middle of Santo Ileso, and the devs have confirmed that you will be able to cross it by boat. There's a moment in one of the Saints Row trailers where we see your character using this holographic shield. This could be a cool line of defense, and it looks like this shield, or maybe some other ability, might enable you to both see and shoot through walls. But doesn't this seem a little high-tech for a group of millennials just starting out their criminal empire? Well, as I mentioned, one of the factions in Saints Row is Marshall, a military-grade weapons manufacturer. And based on what we know, some of their technology is going to be pretty advanced. Game Informer mentions that they use heat vision, maybe to see through walls, and they mention laser lassos, which we actually see in this clip. So my theory is that you'll at some point commandeer Marshall technology to use for yourself. Okay, so this one's interesting. In their interview with MaxiGeek.com, Volition was asked whether you can influence the police in the game, as in, can you basically bribe cops so they chill out? To which Boone had this to say, quote, "Dare we talk about this? So you have this criminal empire that you are building, and you have different things that you can buy and ultimately try to earn. One of these things, I'm not sure how specific I'm allowed to get with this, but one of these things you can build. I'll leave it unnamed so you can experience it, absolutely influences what you're talking about." He went on to say it doesn't just influence it among the police. It does it with all the other 3 gangs as well, so it's not necessarily that you're putting them on your payroll, but you have a way to influence the way they react to you. End quote. So, it sounds like you can earn something that you then build out in the world, and this will affect how both cops and gangs react to you. Very interesting. So there you have it. Those are some of the most interesting gameplay details I discovered about Saints Row. Did I cover anything you didn't already know? Or did I miss anything worth talking about? Let me know in the comments. And with that, I want to thank you for watching this entire video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like, and if you want to see more content just like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. If you want to keep up with me and see what I'm playing, you can follow me on Twitter @QuestModeGames. And finally, I want to remind everyone to never stop questing.